Eddie Murphy is a comedy giant who many of us came to know and love during his run on Saturday Night Live in the 1980s. As far as comedy was concerned, he was an unstoppable force. From Saturday Night Live, he went on to do many stand-up comedy specials, each one seeming bigger than the one before it. He even became an extremely sought-after leading man in comedy films, earning millions for each movie. One of his several fan favorites, Coming to America, was rebooted and released on Amazon Prime in March of 2021. The reboot has a slightly different twist than the original, in which Eddie Murphy portrayed an African prince coming to America to search for a queen. Well, about 9 years after the massive success of Coming to America, many headlines were telling a story that Eddie Murphy was prowling the streets of West Hollywood looking for a different kind of queen. The morning that Eddie Murphy was pulled over by the police with a transsexual prostitute in his car. My sources for this story are Yahoo News, CNN, and People. On May 2nd, 1997, at roughly 4:45 in the morning, police pulled over Eddie Murphy after he picked up a transsexual prostitute. Her name was Atisone Seuli. She was born Kenneth Seuli, a male. At the time that Eddie Murphy picked her up, she was using the name Shalimar. Also, at the time that he picked her up, he was a married man, 4 years into his marriage with Nicole Murphy. Anyway, on May 2nd, 1997, Shalimar got into Eddie Murphy's Toyota Land Cruiser after he picked her up from a well-known homosexual prostitute pickup spot in West Hollywood. Do you all remember Hugh Grant and his incident with Divine Brown? Okay, Eddie Murphy's incident was 2 years after that. If you remember that time period even remotely well, you know that the 1990s was not as accepting of a time as now when it came to anything sexual that wasn't heterosexuality. An opportunity to out a man who called himself straight meant big TV ratings and big newspaper and magazine sales numbers. Eddie Murphy drove his SUV away from the pickup spot for 2 miles when he was stopped. He wasn't arrested or charged with any crime, but the same was not the case for his passenger, Shalimar. The police described her as a known prostitute, and she was arrested on the spot for an outstanding prostitution warrant. Everyone involved seemed to agree on everything that I just said happened on May 2nd, 1997, up to that point. It is from here that we have a he said, she said story. Hear both sides and let me know which story you believe from this point on. Tell me in the comments section. Here's Eddie Murphy's side. Eddie Murphy walked away from that pickup with a clean criminal record, but not too many people believed his side of the story when his publicist gave this excuse for Eddie Murphy's night ride. The claim was that Eddie Murphy was merely giving the prostitute a ride home. Quote, she asked him for a ride, and Eddie did so, like he had helped people in the past, end quote. That rep for Eddie went on to tell CNN that Eddie said, quote, I was trying to be a good Samaritan, and this is what happens, end quote. This incident couldn't have come at a worse time for Eddie. Prior to it, his career had been at a bit of a standstill, but he had just made a nice comeback with The Nutty Professor. So, the last thing that he needed was to be the butt of this kind of joke. So, in an effort to do some damage control, he granted an interview to People magazine. It would be controlled and thought out, and his lawyer, Marty Singer, would be right by his side. The same attorney who represented Bill Cosby. So nothing could go wrong, right? In this damage control interview, Eddie told People that Nicole and the kids were gone, and he had insomnia, so he decided to go for a drive to buy some magazines. Sounds innocent enough, right? He said, quote, I saw this Hawaiian-looking woman and said, what are you doing out here? She said, I'm working. I said, you shouldn't be doing that, meaning soliciting. And bada bing, I'm never giving anyone a lift again. Eddie explained that he thought that Shalimar was a girl, then also said, quote, "That's not even the issue. It wasn't like I was looking for someone. It was a person I assumed was a girl at the corner." He said the whole situation with the trans prostitute was, quote, "embarrassing." But he also said, quote, "I'm not sitting around depressed going, oh, people are going to think I'm not Eddie anymore. I'm not a man. I know I'm a man. I'm a man. I'm not ever on the 50 most wonderful list, but I'm not a degenerate either," end quote. Then Eddie started going on about how, in reality, he was in fact an undercover Good Samaritan. Well, I think that people thought that he was an undercover something, but let's continue with his story. He said that, quote, "What people don't know is, for years and years at night, I'd get in my car, I'd drive all over Manhattan, I'd give derelicts money, I'd stop and talk to homeless people, I'd go to corners where there are prostitutes and give them $5,000 and $10,000 to go home to get off the street. When I'm doing something charitable, I'm not doing it for publicity. It's out of the goodness of my heart." Well, that sounds great by itself, but when Eddie Murphy added this next part, it made people question if his Good Samaritan act was just that, an act. Because after all this talk about helping the homeless and the prostitutes out of the goodness of his heart, he started talking about how he scrubbed clean the inside of his car after Shalimar was arrested by the police. Quote, "After I got home, I wiped off the door handle and the stuff that person had touched," end quote. That person? Yes, that sounds exactly like someone who makes a habit of helping the homeless. I don't think that the word transphobia existed at the time of his interview, but the way that he talked about wiping off everything that person had touched, it sounds like people would call that part of his story transphobic today. At the very least, it is inconsistent with the actions of a man who helps homeless people and prostitutes on a regular basis. Cleaning your car, yes. Scrubbing up behind that person, no. But probably the most notable inconsistency in the People interview is Eddie Murphy saying that he was driving Shalimar home. Well, when he got pulled over, he had already driven past Shalimar's place. Now, on to what she said. The National Enquirer wanted Shalimar's story badly, so badly that they paid Shalimar's $15,000 bail in exchange for her story. So, in an article the Enquirer named Eddie Murphy's Secret Sex Life, His Transvestite Hooker Tells All, Shalimar said that she was looking for Johns when Eddie Murphy pulled up. She said that once she got in his vehicle, Eddie Murphy placed two $100 bills on her leg and asked her if she liked to wear lingerie. She said yes. Then Eddie asked her, "Can I see you in lingerie?" I told him, "Whenever I have the time." He said, "I'll make the time." Shalimar also said that they discussed what kind of sex she liked, to which she replied, "Everything." Eddie Murphy wasn't having it, so he sued the National Enquirer for $5 million for libel, slander, and invasion of privacy because of the published interviews with trans prostitutes. Yes, Shalimar was not the only trans prostitute claiming to have had an encounter with Eddie Murphy. Some basically said that they went all the way with Eddie. He ended up dropping the lawsuit against the National Enquirer, and he was ordered to pay their legal fees. So, again I ask, do you believe Eddie Murphy or Shalimar? Or neither of them? What happened after that? Well, we know that Eddie Murphy went on with his career and still put out great quality work on the screen in movies like his Nutty Professor sequel, Life, and Dreamgirls, and even off the screen with his voiceover work in The PJs and Shrek. And now, another sequel, Coming to America. As for his marriage, this little incident was not enough to make Nicole Murphy leave him. They didn't divorce until 2005 after having 5 children together. As for Shalimar, just shy of a year to the date of her encounter with Eddie Murphy, she was found dead outside of her apartment in her lingerie. This was on April 22, 1998, when her neighbor discovered her body on their apartment sidewalk. Police suspected that Shalimar was locked out of her apartment and tried to use her robe as a rope to slide down from the roof, then swing into an open window. She did so unsuccessfully and instead fell 5 floors to her death due to the severe head trauma she suffered. May she rest in peace. This video was originally uploaded to my main channel, Ty's Hot Mess History, in March of 2021. I'm now moving my Black entertainment and 1950s to 1970s pop culture scandal stories to this dedicated channel, Ty's Hot Mess History Soul. You have a lot more scandalous stories like this on the way, some old and some new. Thank you for watching.